Hey everyone, this is Teresa from Base 10 Montessori, and today we're going to go over subtraction with the golden beads. Now today we're going to go over what it looks like to do this lesson with one child and also with two children. So I'm going to show you what that looks like, and we're going to walk through it step by step. But first, let me remind you what your setup looks like before we get into the actual process of subtraction. So just a reminder, we have the bank, we have the golden bead set up. Here's my little at-home display. Yes, I know it's probably a lot smaller than yours, but for my house, this is enough for me. Now we're going to have large number cards that are set up on a large rug on the floor. So that's what this picture is showing. And don't forget, for each child that participates in this lesson, they need to have their own set of small number cards. And those go up to 3,000. So here's for child 1. And of course child 2. So they each have their own setup of cards. You can set them on a little desk or on a rug. It's totally up to you. So they're going to set those up as well as that rug with the large number cards. Now let me also show you what the setup is going to look like from my diagrams in my album. So here is what my album shows. These are the diagrams I made for training. And as you can see, we're going to start with this minuend number. It is a large number. We're going to set up the minuend, which for this example is going to be 4,676. And then we're going to have the tray for child 1 and the tray for child 2. Now, keep in mind, whatever number you give them, they are not going to go get the golden beads from the bank. They're just getting their cards. So you're going to give them a number and they're going to go get their cards from their table. They are not going to go to the bank and get any beads. So that's going to be different this time. So they're going to have their trays with their numbers on them. And then they're going to come back to you, back to the rug, back to the setup. And also on the rug here, you can see in the top right corner, there's going to be a little rug with cards set up. Now those cards, as you're looking at them, are backwards and upside down. That's because that's where I usually sit. That's where the guide usually sits. I usually sit on that side of the mat. So those cards would be facing me. And those are small number cards for me to use, and we're going to use that later in the presentation. So we're going to set up our minuend. We're going to have large numbers. We're going to have the large number cards, and the guide is going to have the golden beads to go with it. So you've set up the minuend in both your numbers, in your symbols, and in your quantity, your golden beads. Now, something to note as we're going through this is when we start this, we're going to use the term subtraction, right? And we're going to explain that by saying take away. However, this is not the point in the process where we're going to introduce the term minuend or subtrahend. So that's not going to come in this lesson. So I'm only using the word minuend to describe what I'm talking about in this picture, but that's not a term we're going to use in the process with the children during the lesson. The time when we use that term comes during the stamp game. The stamp game is when we really give all the language for the parts of subtraction. Right here, we're just going to talk about subtraction. We're going to call them large numbers and small numbers. And we're going to talk about the answer. And then when we get into the stamp game, we're going to give those labels then. We're going to give the label of minuend. We're going to give the label of subtrahend. We're going to talk about the difference. We're going to talk about the equal bar. All of that happens in the stamp game. Now, there is one more thing I want to note that I'm not sure I emphasize in the video on addition with the golden beads. And that is that this is all about the process. So we're not interested in results right now. Remember, these are 4-year-olds. Unless you're working with an older age group, it might look different if you're in elementary and you're trying to use this process. However, when we're in the 3 to 6-year-old environment, when it comes to the stamp game and when it comes to the golden beads, this is not about the results. This is about the process. And it's okay if the children make mistakes with the final number. We're not going to go back and correct them. So how do we know if we're doing it right? How do we know that this is purposeful if it's not about getting the right number? And my answer to that is you're going to observe them, right? You should be watching, you should be observing. Are they doing the process correctly and they just make a mistake somewhere along the way, an easy mistake? Did they mix up between the number 6 and the number 9, right? Did they make some small mistake along the way? And where is that mistake? And we can address that in a different lesson or in an additional lesson, or sometimes it resolves itself. through peer interaction. But at 4 years old, we're giving them the process of addition, the process of subtraction, multiplication, and division. We are explaining to them what this is all about. We're giving them the definition. We're telling the story of what each thing is. So the direct purpose is to give the impression of subtraction and how it differs from addition. Like I said, this is really about the 4-year-olds. We're not interested in getting them hung up on perfection. That's not what this is about. So when you're thinking about the control of error for this work, it's not about getting the right answer. It's about the process. And if you get hung up on the right answer and correcting them all the time, they're not going to want to go back to it. If they're really struggling, if they're never getting the right number, if they're consistently getting the process wrong, it could be one that this isn't the right timing for this work for them. Either they've missed that window of opportunity for this work to really be engaged in this work, and maybe they'll comprehend it better in the stamp game, or maybe they're not ready for it yet. Maybe they're a little too young. Maybe they're not really that solid on the decimal system, and you have to kind of go back to those fundamentals again. So I just want to emphasize that this is really about process. This should be an enjoyable experience. This should be a social experience for the children. And these activities should be fun. And as we go through the experience of subtraction with the golden beads, I hope that you figure out in your head, kind of start thinking about how you can present this in a way that is authentic to your personality, but also having fun. Right? We want Montessori to be enjoyable. So many teachers in Montessori I see get so strict and grumpy, and they're so rigid that the children don't have any joy in their work. If you don't have joy in your work, the child is not going to have joy in their work either. They're going to model you. If you don't enjoy the lesson, they're not going to enjoy the lesson either. And so I really encourage you to model what you want to see. And while you don't want them to be silly with the materials and playing around with them, you do want them to take those materials seriously. However, you want to have joy in the experience. It shouldn't be stressful. So that's my encouragement for you. That's my challenge for you, is when we're going through this process, think about and reflect on who you are as a teacher, who you are as an educator, who you are as a guide. Think about how you approach this material for yourself. Do you approach it with joy or with dread? And you have to work through that first before you can present this to your students. So find a way to connect with this material if you haven't already, and find the joy in it for yourself, and then bring that out for your students. So with that being said, let me switch over to my other camera, and we're going to go through this process of subtraction with 2 children. That means I'm going to introduce 2 subtrahends. All right, so here we are with our setup. Now, as the guide or the teacher, I'm going to set up my large number cards over here. That would be the minuend. Again, we're not going to use that term when presenting with the golden beads, but to explain it to you, I'm going to use the term minuend because that's where we start. This is our large number that we're going to start with. And on the rug, we're going to set it up with our large number cards, our symbols, and we're also going to have our quantity set up. So I've also got my little golden unit beads right here. And don't forget, for subtraction, we also have our own set of cards. Now you can set them up on the rug and line them up in categories just like I showed in my diagram. However, this tends to get a little messy. Sometimes these cards end up going all over the place. So for me personally, I kind of like to keep them in the box and sort through them that way. Feel free to set this up as it is comfortable for you. Usually I'd sit on this side and my students would be on this side. So these cards would be facing me. But for the purpose of this presentation, we're going to be on the side of the student, so you can see it from the student's perspective. So we have our large mat with our large number cards set up. That's how we got this number. Our 2 students have set up their tables with their smaller number cards. So they're all set up. Now I have to give the first student their first number. And I'm going to give that student the number 2,234. And the student is going to go over to their table where their small number cards are, and they're going to bring back just the number, just that symbol. And they're going to come back to this rug, and they're not going to stop at the bank this time and get golden beads because this is subtraction. And subtraction does things differently. We already have our golden beads set up. So the student does not need to get beads for this presentation. So now that the first student has gotten their cards, they bring it back and it should say 2,234. Now, instead of going to the bank, they just bring it back to the rug and we're going to put it below our minuend because this is our subtrahend right here. Again, we're not using these labels with the student during this lesson, but I'm going to use it to explain it. So we're going to put the subtrahend up here. So now we have our large number card and we have our smaller number card, which is the first student. So as we go through this process, we're going to tell the student that we're going to do subtraction. This means they have to take away from my golden beads. And now this is where your personality is going to come into play. This is where if you're a little more theatrical, you can really get into this and really have fun with this process and say, I have all these golden beads. It's so many. I have 4,676 beads. And along comes whatever their name is, child one. And this child takes some of my beads. How many beads are you going to take from me? And the child's going to say, I'm going to take away 2,234 beads from you. And so that's where we begin. And the guide will say, well, how many units are you going to take from me? And the child is going to say, I'm going to take 4 units. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you can play it up and you can say, oh my goodness, you took away 4 unit beads from me. What else are you going to take away? And then we can look and we can say 3 tens or 30. All right, here we go. We're going to take away 30. 1 10. 2 tens, 3 tens. That's 30. You just took away 30 unit beads from me. Now we get to move on to the hundreds. How many hundreds are you going to take away from me? And the student will say 200. So 1, 2. And at this point, if your student is not laughing and getting really excited about taking away beads from you, then I would say we got to put some more energy into this lesson because this should be really fun. They should be enjoying taking away from you because that really solidifies that idea, that impression of subtraction. So the student's going to take away 200 beads from you. And then you're going to look over and say, oh no, how many thousands are you going to take away from me? And the child is going to probably smile and laugh and say 2,000 beads. So here we go, 1,000. And 2,000. And I'm going to say, oh no, you took away 2,234 beads from me. How many do I have left? And at this point, this is where we go back to our rug with all of our large number cards and we're going to get the answer or the difference. So let's do that right now. Let's count what's left and then go get those cards. So we have 2 units. Let's go over to our large number rug and find the 2 symbol. There it is. Now, let's see. How many tens do we have left? 1 10, 2 tens, 3 tens, 4 tens, and 4 tens is 40. Let's go over to our tens and get the symbol for 40. 4 tens is 40. And let's count our hundreds. 100, 200, 300, 400. Here's 400. And how many thousands do we have left? 1, 2, 2,000. Let's go get our 2,000 symbol. And there we go, right? This is what we have left. So now we get to do the fun part. And we're going to set it right here. But we're not done yet. This is what it would look like if we were doing subtraction with one child. However, we're going to do 2 subtrahends today, so we got to keep going. But before we move on to the second child, we need to do something with the numbers at the top. We need to turn those numbers over. The reason why we do this is because in Montessori, we really like to make sure we're working in isolation so that we don't have too much going on at one time. So before the second child starts doing their part of the process, we're going to turn this over, and now our answer, our difference from the first child, becomes our minuend for the second child. So here's our new minuend, and we have the quantity to match. And now we have to move on to the second child. So as we move on to do the second part of our subtraction process, I'm going to give the second student a new number, and that number is going to be 1,121. So the student is going to go back to their table with their small cards, and they're going to bring back the number 1,121. So as soon as they bring it back, you get to do the same thing as before. And by the way, look at how I'm lining it all up right here. When I was in training, it was very important to my trainer that I lined the units up. So something to be aware of, maybe don't put it over here, but over here, because we really want to emphasize that when we start to exchange and borrow, that we're lining up those units. So now that the second child has brought me their cards, they brought me their symbol, it's time to find their quantity. And we're going to go through the same process again and saying, oh my goodness, I have this large number, not quite as large as it was before because this child took away a bunch of beads for me, but I have this large number here. And along comes this new child and starts taking away my beads as well. And how many units is this child going to take from me? And hopefully the child says 1 unit. I'm going to say, how many 10s are you going to take from me? And they're going to say 2. 1 10, 2 10s. So that's 20. Now, how many hundreds are you going to take from me? And the child is going to say 1. How many thousands? 1. So the second child has taken away beads from me as well. Oh goodness, how many beads do I have left? And again, if you're a theatrical person, if you're a dramatic person, you can really have fun with this. If you're more understated, that's okay too. It's important to be authentic to your personality and your style. But just remember to emphasize that feeling of you're taking away, because this is all about the process. This is all about the definition, giving them the impression and the definition for what subtraction is. That's what they want to walk away from this with. This idea that you're taking away. So once the child has taken away the quantity for this symbol, we get to find the new answer, right? But instead of going back to our rug with our large number cards, we are going to go to these small number cards. This is the one where if I stand on this side, these would be facing me. So to find this answer, we're going to go to the guide's small number box right here. And we're going to say how many units? Say there's 1 unit. And how many 10s do I have left? I have 2 10s left. How many hundreds do I have left? I have 300 left. And how many thousands do I have left? I only have 1. Let's put this together. And of course, we want to do it in the most fun way possible, so we got to do the slide. So our answer is 1,321. Let's move our quantity to match our answer right here. So that way we have symbol and quantity right next to each other. So now that we've done all this, we've gone through the whole process. And the way we always end our collective exercises lessons is by telling a story. Now, some people do this fantastical story with like kings and queens, and I don't know if that's an AMS thing or I'm not sure where that came from. I don't know that story. Some people seem to tell it, but when I was in training, my guides said, we're going to keep this very simple. We're not going to pretend that this is something it's not. We want to be concrete because in the first plane of development, which is 0 to 6 years old, this is a very concrete stage. So we want to be concrete. We don't want to be fantastical with these. So I'm going to tell the story of subtraction, but I'm not going to embellish. So as we tell the story of subtraction, we have to flip over those top cards again. Let's tell the story of subtraction. Once upon a time, I had 4,676 beads. I had so many beads. I had this really large number of 4,676. And along came my first student, and they took some away from me. They took away 2,234 beads from me. And when that happened, all I had left was 2,442. So I started out with a really large number. And then a smaller number took some away from me. And I ended up with 2,442. But then something else happened. Another student came along and took away 1,121 beads from me. And my larger number right here got even smaller. I ended up with 1,321 beads. So when we have a large number and we have a smaller number that takes away from that larger number, and we get a small number at the end, that's called subtraction. And that's as simple as it has to be for telling the story. We don't have to embellish. We don't have to tell fantastical stories. We don't have to pretend these are candies or anything like that. We simply state what they are. And for a 4-year-old, for a young child that's in that first plane of development, that's all the creativity you need with the golden beads. Let the golden beads speak for themselves. We don't have to get fantastical with it. They're going to have a lot of fun. If you're being theatrical, if you're being dramatic, if you're really emphasizing that idea of you're taking something away from me, they're going to have a lot of fun just with that. So we really don't have to get into anything fantastical or pretend that these are something that they're not. So that is how you do subtraction. Now, I'm not going to get into dynamic subtraction today. So if you want to see how to borrow with this, then I can do that in a separate video. But just to simply tell you about it real quick, when you get to a point where you run out of a category, you're going to say, oh, you know what? When that happens, we have to go to the bank. We have to take a larger category and we have to go to the bank and exchange it for a smaller one so we can make some more. So that really quick is how you would go about borrowing. But if you want to see a video of that, if you want to see an actual presentation of that, just let me know in the comment section down below and I'll make sure to get that video out to you. With that being said, that is all I have for you today on subtraction. So I hope you liked this video. If you did, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you hopefully in the next video.